Hi, my name is Marco Malero with Qualified Plan Advisors, and one of my favorite topics to talk about is financial wellness. Well, being in the situation that we're in today, I want to change it up a little bit, right? And what we want to talk about today is the CARES Act and how that affects plan sponsors, how that affects fiduciaries, retirement plan committees, or employers. And we have a special guest again today with us, Rob Massa, managing director of the Houston office. So, Rob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Marco, thanks for having me. Great to join you as always.
All right, awesome. And we've been getting a lot of questions from plan sponsors of the CARES Act and what they need to know. And then we've also been getting updates from various record keepers about the CARES Act. So if you don't mind just summarizing the CARES Act for us.
All right, so the CARES Act came up with several new features that we could offer to employees to make this process a little bit less painful for them on a financial level, giving them access to their retirement benefits in a way that maybe previously wasn't available. The first of the provisions that was made was a withdrawal provision, akin to a hardship withdrawal, okay? But it's specifically for COVID-related needs, and you could now take an in-service or termination of service distribution if you were an affected participant, withdraw money from your account and have that withdrawal taxable, but no longer subject to a 10% penalty. That's kind of a unique provision. The additional benefit of this is that you could withdraw this, and the tax burden on it, the ordinary income tax burden, instead of being taxed all in 1 year, you could spread that over 3 years ratably. So think of it this way: if I was taking out $10,000 and it turned out I owed $3,000 in taxes, instead of paying it all in 2010, paying 2020, excuse me, paying all 3,000 in 2020, you could pay $1,000 per year over the next 3 years. In addition, if within 3 years you could actually put all of the money back in, and like a rollover back in of that transaction. Typically, a rollover distribution has to be put back in 60 days. They're giving you 3 years to use the money for immediate needs and give you the option to put that back. So I think that's a terrific provision that I thought was a very flexible provision, well thought out provision. Then there are the two different features on loans that they did, which first of all, you are now allowed to take a loan, hypothetically. You're allowed to offer your employees the opportunity to suspend any existing loan payments for the next 12 months on loans that they have outstanding from the retirement plan. Interest still accrues on these loans, but the payments would be deferred, and that does not violate the 5-year withdrawal, the 5-year loan payment repayment rule. So this gives them a little bit of relief on those loans, and I thought that was an interesting concept as well. What you can also do is you can offer a new COVID-related loan that allows you really kind of to double up on what the normal loan provisions are. So typically, the loan provisions in a loan, in a loan policy for a retirement plan allow employees to take up to a maximum of 50% of their account balance or $50,000, whichever's less. The new COVID-related loan option allows you to enable your employees to take up to 100% of their vested account balance or $100,000, whichever's less. So that's a big, big change. And then finally, required minimum distributions, which are the distributions for those formerly age 70 and a half, now 72 or older from the new Secure Act. Those are the government requires retired people to take this money. If they haven't been taking, they have to take a minimum amount every year. This year's minimums are suspended. But I do want to keep something in mind. These provisions, first of all, are optional, and second of all, they're only available for eligible people, okay? And that's the key. It's people who are diagnosed with COVID-19, a spouse or dependent who's diagnosed, or people who experience adverse financial consequences, such as being quarantined or furloughed or laid off or reduced hours, things of that nature. You have to be directly impacted in order to take one of these special distribution or loan options.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It sounds like there's really three main areas that the CARES Act really affects. So that's, again, COVID-19 distributions, loans and then RMDs, but we want to make sure that it's an option for each plan sponsor. So it might vary depending on what they'd want to do. And can you talk a little bit more, because we've been getting a lot of feedback and a lot of response and updates from all of the different providers that are out there. And can you talk a little bit more about how it's being implemented through them and what we should know when interacting with our particular provider?
That's a really great question, actually, because this is kind of a complicated topic. Different record keepers and third-party administrators have handled this uniquely differently. What you'll often find is that some record keepers are automatically opting their clients into all of these provisions. Others are opting you out, and you must opt in yourself. And some are kind of splitting the difference and saying we're going to opt you automatically into some and not others. So there's no rhyme or reason. I think it really depends on how the record keepers, first of all, view the law and its contents, and second of all, how they view the plan document provisions. Remember, when you add these changes, you have to amend a plan document, and most clients are on their vendor's prototype plan document. And so they can pretty much, if they look at these as, if the vendor looks at these as a required amendment, they may opt you in on a snap-on amendment that you then have to fill out later and say, no, I really didn't want to do that. And they implement, and then you amend later, because you don't have to physically amend for this until the end of December of 2022. So I can operate without the amendment. So the first thing you really need to do is contact your vendor on whether they've opted you in on this. And then you want to talk to them procedurally as well. I'll give you one example, and then we can move on. But let's say, for the sake of argument, you're talking about loans, and we're talking about loan suspensions very specifically. I've got 52 participants in my plan that I'm taking loan payments out for right now at a payroll. Who's going to tell me who's suspended? How are they going to communicate that to me? When does that start? How are they going to communicate to me that the payments should had start up again once they've been suspended? How is this process going to operate so that you understand it? And what happens if an employee terminates? These are all some of the questions that kind of get dug up in the process, and you have to think about the operational consequences of a lot of these different provisions. So definitely reach out to your vendors, ask them how they're handling it if they haven't contacted you. If they have contacted you, read what they've given, give them a call and go through it with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what I'm hearing is every record keeper, every TPA, they're handling it completely different. Contact them, make sure that you understand your plan document for your plan, and know how they're going to implement these special provisions. So that's great feedback. What other it sounds very complex, right? Because we're going through a pandemic, something that none of us have gone through before, and record keepers, TPAs, employers, plan sponsors, consultants. So what are some things, though, an employer or plan sponsor should be taken into consideration when looking at the CARES Act and some of the provisions that they can implement?
No, that is a great question and it really does depend. And we say this a lot in this industry. When we're dealing with individuals, we give them advice. Well, it depends on your own tax advice. Well, as a corporation, when you're trying to this really does depend on how this has affected your organization personally. It is very different if you're a hospital or a nursing organization versus a retail restaurant versus an energy company. You've been impacted about this very differently. So I think you have to look at your demographics, your population. Have you furloughed a lot of people? Are you an essential organization? You furloughed no one. If you're in some industries in a minor context might actually make money off of this. I mean, I think of 3M as an example. I'm not making a recommendation. I'm saying they're making all these masks now. They've had to generate a lot of materials, and the people who provide the materials to make those masks. These are businesses who have actually gotten a boon from this.
Right.
That's how things work. They're not going to have the same challenges as an oil producer who's seen oil prices crash and there's no demand. That's a completely different context. So think about it in that environment, in your particular environment, and say, yeah, we need to offer this provision but not that provision, or we need to offer all or none of the provisions, or anything in between. It really, really depends individually.
Yeah, That's great advice. Every employer is just they have a different set of population for of employees, and so they're all being affected differently just based upon the industry. And that's what I've personally seen is just talking to each employer just on a case by case basis. So I think that's the best takeaway is deciding what makes best sense for you as an employer, and then what also makes the best sense for your employees. And again, make sure to get your team involved, get your record keeper, get your TPAs, get your plan consultant, get us involved, and we're happy to help. We'll also provide a couple extra tools and resources. I know our team at Qualified Plan Advisors, we come up with a couple just summaries that people can read through just to get some additional guidance. So thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from you if you have any additional questions. Take care.